wrong with you?
Water's richest chest I wish to say. All snackies. Watch lessons. It's on insane talks and random activities. To that, from computer or tablet. It's all in libraries.
Get out. It's including peer kids, fish, but fun house, and address a shong heat. And coming with the now the peer kids feel. Neighboring Friday is vodka. JD Foundation, the Science Foundation, knowledge opportunity and facilities. EY, build up for working worlds with additional funding from Lynn and Arclea, the Tucker Bear Foundation, Shy Job Donation, Gate, and Markets.
It was Audre Lorde who said, "It is not our difference that divide us, it is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences." Hello, boys and girls. My name is Miss Aaliyah Brewster, and welcome to another edition of Grade 4 Social Studies. It's my pleasure to guide you through today's lesson. Today we'll be learning African culture. Before we begin, let's do a brief recap on who we are as a people. Every family has something in common. They are all a part of the human race. The human race is divided into 6 main ethnic groups. All these groups can be found in Guyana, namely the Amerindians, the Europeans, the Africans, the Portuguese, the East Indians, and the Chinese. There is also the mixed race, which describes persons that have a combination of 2 or more main race in their genetics. But how did the Africans came to live in Guyana? Afro-Guyanese, which is the name given to persons of African descent that resides in Guyana, are generally descendants from the enslaved people that were brought to Guyana from the coast of West Africa to work on the sugar plantation during the era of the Atlantic slave trade. They were the 3rd group to come to work in Guyana. The process that was responsible for transporting Africans to Guyana is the triangular trade. The triangular trade existed between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. The triangular trade was given its name due to the shape that the voyage created between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. The triangular trade consisted of 3 stages. Stage 1 was a voyage from Europe to Africa. Manufactured goods such as clothing, alcohol, beads, metal, and guns were taken from Europe to Africa and exchanged for captured Africans. Stage 2 is the voyage from Africa to the Americas and the West Indies. This stage was also known as the Middle Passage. Captured Africans were transported on board of a slave ship from Africa to the Americans and the West Indies. They were also sold as slaves. The final stage, which is stage 3, is the voyage from the Americas and the West Indies to Europe. Here, raw materials such as cotton, sugar, tobacco, molasses, and rum, which were all products of slave labor on the plantation, were sold to Europe. The trade ship took 5 to 12 weeks to complete this trip. You may have heard me mention the word slavery more than once in starting this lesson, but what exactly is slavery? Slavery is the practice of one group of people owning another. The group that is owned are known as the enslaved. Enslaved people have to work for the owners, doing whatever the owners ask them to do. In the past, many societies had slavery. However, almost all societies now consider slavery to be wrong. They consider personal freedom to be a basic human right. The industry of slavery started after the unsuccessful experiments with growing tobacco. The English colonists tried growing sugarcane in the Caribbean. This was not a local plant, but it grew well after its introduction. Sugarcane could be used to make various products. There was sugar, of course, which went well with tea, coffee, and chocolate. It could also be used to make rum, a strong alcoholic drink. A lot of people in Europe wanted these products, and as a result, those who grew it, known as the planters, became very wealthy. This also made the Caribbean colonies valuable as well as vulnerable. For enslaved Africans on the plantation, the work was always hard. They were punished with beatings and other forms of torture for many different reasons. They did not have enough to eat, decent places to live, or good clothes to wear. They were not allowed to learn to read nor write. They could also be sold at any time and separated from their family. Some tried to rebel against their owners, but they would be punished or killed for doing so. On the topic of rebellion, There were many slaves who were seeking their freedom and a way to escape the harsh and brutal treatment. Some enslaved people rose up against the planters. For example, let's look at Coffee. Coffee is a slave rebellion leader. Like most enslaved, he was captured from West Africa and stolen to work on the sugar plantation, specifically the Dutch colony of Berbice. He became famous because in 1763, he led a revolt of more than 2,500 slaves against the colony. Today, he is a national hero in Guyana. His efforts were materialized in a monument known as the 1763 Monument, which can be found in Guyana on Durban Street. After many attempts at freedom, in the year 1834, slavery ended. However, most Caribbean territories celebrate the end of slavery on August the 1st. This day is known as Emancipation Day. Now let's move on to discuss the Africans' contribution to our diverse culture. To begin, we're going to look at the various dishes that were contributed. First, we're going to talk about cook-up rice. Cook-up rice is a traditional Guyanese recipe that is very versatile. It is a one-pot dish that can be made with any type of peas, such as pigeon peas, chickpeas, and even black-eyed peas. It also contains meat. Another meal that was contributed by the Africans is metemgee. Metemgee is a Guyanese Creole stew of mixed meat, saltfish, and dumplings with coconut milk, cassava, yam, plantains, okra, onions, thyme, and hot pepper sauce. Yum, delicious. They also contributed fufu. The term fufu refers to any ground provision or a combination of ground provisions that have been boiled, pounded, or mashed, then formed into balls. The Africans also contributed konki. Konki is a sweet dish made from cornmeal, pumpkin, coconut, sugar, and warm spices steamed in a banana leaf. Now we're going to move on to discuss the various clothing that were contributed by the Africans. And as you can see from my attire, I'm well affiliated. But there are various types of clothing that were contributed besides the one that I have on. They are the dashikis, head ties, wraps, and the jalaba. The Africans also contributed fine jewelry. African jewelries are known for their quality and beauty all over the world. There are many types of African jewelry, such as pendants, bracelets, earrings, and necklaces. Some materials that are used to make African jewelry are amber, carved stone, glass, wood, paper, ivory, animal hair, eggshell, bone, seashell, and even cloth. The Africans also contributed musical instruments. Musical instruments in Africa are not only used for making music, they are also used to communicate to both man and spirit, translating and emanating daily experiences and events. These instruments include drums, shakers or shak-shak, and the marimba, which is like a xylophone. Using photographs, we're now going to examine the various crafts that were contributed by the Africans. These crafts include pottery, ceramics, beadwork, basketry, dolls, metalware. Now let's move on to discuss the rituals and beliefs that are observed in Guyana today as a contribution from the Africans. First, we're going to look at the death rituals. When someone from a traditional Afro-Guyanese home passes away, there are several ways in which the passing is observed, but the main characteristic is the beating of drums until midnight, sometimes later, and singing or chanting of death hymns. While drummers play the evocative melodies all night, African singers would chant songs that would lead them off into the humming of other spiritual songs which most do not understand. This ritual is usually observed in the yard or bottom house of the deceased. Some of the songs include Congo Creole, One by One, Awi Agowe, Bimbo Bimbo Solomon, and Do Like a Me, You're Gonna Live Solomon. The songs are believed to give the spirit of the deceased a smooth passage to the other side. Another belief that was contributed by the Africans is Comfort. Comfort focuses on the water mama, which is the goddess of the water. The ceremony takes place during a full moon in black waters. It is also marked by elements of ecstatic trance-like dancing and spirit possession, which is induced by drumming. It is practiced in Guyana mainly by the descendants of the enslaved Africans. According to social linguist Guy Gibbons, the foremost expert on Guyanese comfort, the religion is currently practiced by about 10% of the country's African Guyanese population. Cultural historian Brian Moore also indicated that in the post-colonial Guyana, the religious practices designated by the term comfort were also referred to as Watamama in honor of the river gods. Another element that was contributed from the Africans is a cleansing ceremony. Most cleansing ceremonies by Afro-Guyanese are conducted at the seawalls early in the morning. Two women, either clothed in white, African dresses, or African prints, would bathe the person who is said to be either possessed or touched by an evil eye. In some cases, the person is scrubbed from head to toe with special brews made by a witch doctor or a obia man or woman. In some African homes, preventing an evil force from entering and interfering with a newly married couple can be done through various traditional methods. One involves an egg, which is washed, placed in a clean glass, filled with water, which is then placed over the front door of the home. One of the most popular religious beliefs of the Africans is obia. It is considered to be the spiritual magic of the first human societies on the African continent and is practiced in Guyana in its raw and pure form. The mysteries of obia have been studied carefully by scientists alike, but none have completely unraveled its mysteries. Yet, many locals have given testimony to its power. The persons performing the spiritual magic is called a witch doctor or a obia man. Obia can be used to mend broken hearts. It provides spells for love, money, spiritual protection, and just about anything at all. They are known to be successful once it is the will of good and the evil spirits. However, the rituals and practices in this field still remains a closely guarded secret. Folklore is another major contribution from the Africans. Folklore is a collection of fictional stories about animals and people. They can come in the form of myths, jokes, songs, tales, and even quotes. It is the description of culture which has been passed down verbally from one generation to another. However, many folklores are now in written form. Folklore is also known as folk literature or oral traditions. The people from Africa included unique characteristics to their folklore, showing their way of life and the animals and the plants that surrounded them. African stories sometimes include trickster animals and spirits. Before we go, I would like to read a folklore story for you. The name of this story is The Lightning and the Thunder. In the olden days, the thunder and lightning lived on earth amongst all other people. But the king made them live at the far end of town, as far away as possible from other people's houses. The thunder was an old mother sheep, and the lightning was her son, a ram. Whenever the ram got angry, he used to go out, burn people's houses, knock down trees. He even did damage to farms and sometimes killed people. Whenever the lightning did these things, his mother used to call out to him in a very loud voice to stop and do not do any more damage. But the lightning did not care in the least for what his mother said. And when he was in a bad temper, he would do the very same amount of damage as he did before. At last, the people could not stand it any longer and complained to the king. So the king made a special order that the sheep, Thunder, and her son, Lightning, should leave the town and live in the far end of the bush. This did not do much good, as when the ram got angry, he still burnt the forest, and the flames sometimes would spread to farms and consume them. So the people complained again, and the king banished both the lightning and the thunder from the earth and made them live in the sky, where they could not cause so much destruction. Ever since when the lightning is angry, he would still commit the same amount of damage as before, but you can hear his mother Thunder rebuking him and telling him to stop. Sometimes, however, when the mother has gone away some distance from her naughty son, you could still hear the sounds he makes when he's angry and the damage that he's done. But his mother's voice can never be heard. Okay, boys and girls, that has brought us to the end of the folklore story, and it's time for us to close our lesson. But just before we go, remember the words of Audre Lorde. It is not our difference that divides us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. Thank you once again for tuning in, boys and girls, and goodbye.
Welcome to Cyber Smarts, a program which features trending topics in the cyber world. In this episode, we will be talking about the dark web. From time to time, you will come across digital terms that you're not quite familiar with. Two of these terms, which are often used interchangeably, are the dark web and the deep web. However, are they really the same? Before we can truly understand the dark web, we must first have an idea of the different types of webs in the digital world. The internet is sizable, with millions of web pages, databases, and servers that run 24 hours a day. But the so-called visible internet, also known as surface web or open web, which comprises sites that can be found using search engines like Google and Yahoo, is just a tip of the iceberg. If we continue to visualize the entire web like an iceberg, the open web or surface web is the visible surface layer that's above the water. From a statistical standpoint, this collective of websites and data makes up just under 5% of the total internet. All commonly public-facing websites accessed via traditional browsers like Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, and Firefox are contained here. These websites are indexed, allowing popular search engines to find them upon a user's request. Next, lying just below the surface of the water, lies the deep web, which accounts for approximately 90% of all websites. This is the part of the web that we do not ordinarily see and is much larger than the surface web. Sites on the deep web are not indexed and cannot be found via search engines. Even though the deep web is not too accessible via normal search engines, much of it is actually perfectly safe and legal, with many organizations and even governments using it for various perfectly legal purposes. And finally, the dark web. This is a portion of the deep web that is intentionally hidden from ordinary internet users. All of its data is encrypted and only accessible via special software configurations or authorization. Using our ocean and iceberg visuals, the dark web would be the bottom tip of the submerged iceberg that few will ever interact with or even see. The reputation of the dark web has often been linked to criminal intent or illegal content, and trading sites where users can purchase illicit goods and services. However, non-criminal parties have also made use of this framework for its anonymity. So, now that we know about the dark web, let's be cyber smart.
Hi there, boys and girls. Welcome to another exciting session as we continue to prepare for our upcoming National Grade 6 examination. Now, in trying to understand the story, it is more than being able to read the words. It is also important to understand the elements that make up that story. Now, I know that we would have focused a lot on elements of stories in our composition sessions, but it is also important in our reading sessions. Now, remember, some of the stories are not stories that you would have written, but it is important that you understand how the writer would have gone about planning what they would have planned in order to make this story or to put this story together. So in other words, what you have to try to do with what the writer put together is to break it apart and identify the various elements in story writing. So what I'm saying is that you have to try to figure out who was or were the characters in the story, the conflict or high point of the story, the setting, the theme or main ideas in the story. So in doing this, we say that we are looking at the outline of the story. So today for our session, we're going to be looking at story outline. Remember, it is one thing to build from scratch, but it is another thing to study and report accurately on how something created by someone else was built. I think that's an extra skill that you could develop. So let our lesson begin. Now today, we're going to be revisiting the story of the garbage collectors, and we're going to be looking at the story outline. So what exactly is the story outline? The story outline is a way for writers to organize the event of their story before they actually write it. But today, as I said, we're going to try to identify what were the things in terms of the elements in the story that we would have read. Now, why is it important to do story outline? It helps you when you're not sure where to begin or how to continue the story. Outlining your ideas can help you to put one word in front of another. So the story outline is also considered to be a sturdy bridge between your story ideas and a polished work in writing. So there are different elements, as I said, and we would have covered them, but let's review them. These elements include setting, and we learned that the setting refers to where and when the story is taking place or has taken place. Then we have characters. Characters refers to persons or animals in the stories, or sometimes it could be an object. We have the conflict. The conflict is the problem in the story. Then we have solution, how the conflict was solved. We have the rising action, or I like to say the high point.